Well, good evening, and thank you all once again for being here. So, when I was growing up, I loved going over to my cousin's house to play Nintendo 64. So you can imagine my disappointment when I went over one day and found out his dog had chewed through one of the cables. Now, instead of getting upset, I decided I was going to fix it. So I taught myself how to solder the two loose ends of the wire together. Now, before we begin, we got a couple things that we need. First of all, we've got our pencil tip or pencil grit soldering iron and a Weller soldering base. Next we have 4060 rosin core solder. Now, of course, we have the two wires that we're going to attempt to solder together. And this little device right here is called a third hand. So we actually use it to hold the two wires while we're soldering. So before we get the soldering iron going, we're going to take the two wires that we want to solder, we're going to twist them together just like a twisty. So it's important to have a strong mechanical connection before we actually begin soldering. I'm going to place these right into the third hand device, so we'll be ready to go. Now, before we go any further, I've actually got a video from YouTube. I'll explain a few of the steps.
The first thing we do prior to soldering is tin the tip of the soldering iron. Then I knock off the excess solder and then lightly tin the tip again. I then place the tin tip of the soldering iron firmly against the wire. The idea is to use the iron to heat the wire, then melt the solder onto the heated wire. Never touch the solder to the tip of the iron while you're actually soldering. The solder only touches the joint you're soldering. As you can see, once the joint is heated up, the solder will flow onto the joint. Don't try to push or paste the solder onto the joint. Just touch the solder to the joint until it starts melting and let it flow onto the joint.
Alright, so there we have a nice example. So the first step, he said we've got to tin the tip. Now this is a very important step. What that means, we're going to take a little bit of solder and go ahead and apply it to the tip of our hot soldering iron. We're going to go ahead and try to clean off all the oxidation. It's important to clean off the oxidation, therefore we get a good heat transfer from our soldering iron to our wires. So go ahead and try that again. And next, we're going to take the tip of our soldering iron and apply it directly to the wires. We're going to get a good heat transfer from the tip to the wires. We put it underneath. We're going to apply the solder directly onto the wires. We don't want to do too much. We want just enough to make a nice, clean, even joint. It should be shiny. And there you have it. Got a solid bond. We'll pass that around. So as you see, soldering can be very practical. I've used it to solder many things like extension cords or Christmas tree lights whenever the wires break. Or my hobby is even making flashlights, so I'll solder circuits and small LEDs as well. So next time your Nintendo 64 breaks, instead of just throwing the parts away or throwing the whole thing away, go ahead and try your hand at soldering. So at this point, are there any questions?
How much does like a soldering iron cost?
Well, one like this, I believe you could get at Radio Shack for around $40. Any other questions?
What temperature does the soldering iron get to?
That's a very good question. I'll have to look that one up for you. Yes.
I think you said the solder was 4060. What does that mean?
4060. So that means that we've got 40% lead and 60% tin. And then the rosin core in the solder, that's actually a flux. And a flux is like an acid that will clean off the oxidation from our tip. Well, thank you all very much.